Hi, welcome to the Signal Path. In this episode, I'm going to try another repair. This is a Chub. Now, what is a Chub? It is a multi-channel temperature sensor. This is actually from Hart Scientific, which was later acquired by Fluke. And this particular model is intended for resistive-based temperature sensors, which we will take a look at in the back. Unfortunately, this one doesn't work. It does have a big LCD screen and a couple of buttons with menus built into it. If I flip it to the other side, you will see that on the other side, what we have are a whole bunch of fancy low EMF terminals. And these are all 4-wire measurements. So you basically connect your resistor, which is going to be temperature dependent, across this with a sense port, and you can measure 4 of them simultaneously. These are actually option cards, and you can have them incorporating things like thermocouples. So you can either measure that or thermocouples. These are pretty interesting. I wouldn't necessarily recommend buying one of these. These are pretty old. I think Lakeshore has a much better solution now, which I will show you in a different video. But this is a non-functioning one, and I thought we can try and repair it. Let's see. So this unit does require a DC power supply, about 15 volts 1 amp that you can apply here in the terminal jack in the back, and it does have a power switch and a charge LED. And that's because on the other side of it you can put a battery in there, which then can make this be completely portable as well as very low noise with the built-in battery. Now, having said that, when I plugged it in, nothing would happen, even the charge LED wouldn't turn on. And there are 2 fuses over here, and what do you know it? The top fuse was dead. I already replaced the top fuse, and I thought, hey, that's a pretty boring repair. Maybe somebody just reverse biased it or so and just damaged the fuse. But then I noticed that even with the fuse replaced, when you connect it, it draws a lot of current, which explains why the fuse died originally. That must have been the original cause. So something else is wrong. Now this is a bit more interesting to investigate. So I thought we should take a look at it. So you can see here there's a board at the top, which is connected to 2 of the inputs, and there is a bunch of 0.1% precision resistors over there. In order to really read these resistor values very accurately, you need some precision references in there as well. Underneath this is the digital board and some bunch of memories and some EEPROM for processors, and there's an exactly identical board on the other side of this, which then makes up the 4 input channels. There's some power conditioning over here, maybe some voltage regulator, and the cables that go to the front panel. Really simple all through whole design. So let's take a look at it. All right, so I have a current limited power supply over here, 15 volts. I'm limiting it to half an amp just to make sure I don't do any other damage to this. Connecting in the back, if I'm going to enable that, there you go. If you look, you can see that the charge light does indeed turn on. So something is receiving power and some regulation is happening for charging the battery. There's nothing in there, of course, so it's just sitting open circuit. But look what happens when I turn it on. As soon as I try to turn it on, you can see it immediately jumps to current limiting and it goes to 7 volts and nothing shows up on the display. Another symptom that I notice is that it does have a squeaky sound coming from it, which is very much a telltale of DC-DC converters, and there are not that many DC-DC converters on this, so I'm going to take a closer look at them, and that might be part of the problem. If there's a short after the DC-DC power supply, or there's some other issue with it, that could be causing that. So let's do further investigation there. So let's see what we have. If I look here on the top, this is the fuse that I replaced right over there. That's where the power is coming in. This is the switch. I don't see anything in there for DC-DC converters. And over here, I see one right over here. This is the one that was getting hot when I put my finger on it when I was turning it on. And there's one down here. So let's zoom in a little bit here, see what kind of DC-DC converter we're dealing with here. This is a Max 1626. Yep. And this looks like the output right over here. This must be the CMOS for the switching. There is a series resistor in it, so if there's a problem, this actually will drop the voltage, which is consistent with not seeing any other life potentially if there is a problem with this one. Now, I could remove this potentially, but if I remove it and power it on, there is a chance that the stray voltage here might turn this on. I'm not sure if this is an NMOS or a PMOS, but just to avoid risking any problem, we could just replace it. These are not expensive parts. I can just get some from DigiKey and quickly take a look at it. Yeah, everything looks good. I don't see any immediate problems, to be honest, anywhere. There's 2 LEDs, none of these lit up when I turn it on. Everything looks good. Go over here. Yeah, all right, let's change the DC-DC converter. And here we are with the DC-DC converter, the Max 1626 having been replaced. Now there is something about this circuit that troubles me a little bit. If you look here, this line is the main power supply coming from the outside. That's where we were applying the 15 volts. And we do have a soft start with this MOSFET, which then enables the power supply to reach this resistor and then ultimately reach the Max 1626 DC-DC converter power supply input. This then controls our switching MOS transistor over here, which is in series with this inductor and ultimately produces the output voltage in a buck conversion fashion. So essentially, if you keep this MOSFET completely on, you have a direct path from the power supply through that and through the inductor and through everything else. So if there is a malfunction in DC-DC converter, it is conceivable that it was just simply keeping this device on, which then we're trying to put 15 volts on a lot of devices that were rated for 5 volts because this is a 5 volt buck converter. So that could potentially have caused a cascade failure that can also explain why there is so much power supply draw. Well, first thing first, let's power this on, make sure the 5-volt supply is actually there, and if it's drawing a reasonable amount of current, then we can turn on attention to the rest of the stuff, which is all the way on this side. Things like our, our main processor and everything else. I hope that these things have actually survived, but anyway, we'll have to try to find out. Okay, so let's do the same experiment again. I have the instrument connected to 15 volts. Right now it's turned off and it's drawing 53 milliamp, which I think is the same as before. The LED charge light is also on. Let's go ahead and turn the main switch on here. And okay, well, there's nothing on the display. That's unfortunate. But we do see that it's drawing 167 milliamp, which is considerably better than it was before. It was putting itself into constant current at 1 amp. So something's definitely changed. Let's check the power supply here. Let's see if it is producing the right power supply voltage. And do we have the right voltage? There it is, 4.93 volts. Okay, so the DC-DC converter is definitely working. Something certainly has improved. I don't feel anything getting warm in here, which is a good sign. But let's take a closer look and see what the architecture is to the processor, and also check around to see if there is any activity, digital activity on this board, because certainly nothing on display. So let's see what we have here. At the heart of this, we do have an 8-bit microprocessor. I think this is an old Intel part. We do have a UV erasable EEPROM, and that is probably the software that this thing runs on, the firmware. We do have some ROM here, which may be some configuration flash, maybe some calibration file. Not sure what's on this one. And then we do have a timekeeping RAM battery backup memory here as well, maybe for some configurations or something else, or maybe the calibration is on here. So either way, all of these things are running from 5 volts, among other things. So let's take a look and see if there is any activity, because if this thing is running in the background, there should be communication between all of these components that are all connected together. If we do see something, of course, there's a clock as well. And if those are all working, then we can dig in a little bit deeper. Here, I'm going to use the Rode & Schwarz MX038, which I've done a complete teardown and review of very recently on the channel. Definitely check it out if you want to see how it works. So let's try the power supply of the microprocessor first. There it is, 5 volts. That's to be expected, directly connected to the DC-DC converter. Let's see, do we have any clock activity? And yep, we definitely have our clock, which is nice. There you go, zoom in a little bit more. There it is. Yep, it is definitely present, so that's not an issue. Let's see if there is any activity at all on any of these pins. Let's try some of these pins here. That's high, and that is high also. Low. Let's try some of the address pins. Nope, nothing. Nothing, nothing. Nope, it's all quiet. Anything on the EEPROM? High, another high signal. Yeah, there's nothing. All right, well, that's a problem. So even though the microprocessor has clock, it's not doing anything at all. So I'm beginning to think that perhaps there might be some damage. Now, it is not hot at all, but it is possible that something's happened to it. And you may ask, well, what about the EEPROM? I guess it could be that too, but these are pretty inexpensive. Let's take it one step at a time. Let's replace that. And there's actually another thing here. There's an IC in here responsible for a kind of a watch time. Let's check that to see if that's working. So there is a management IC next to the microprocessor. This management IC is responsible for providing a reset to the microcontroller if there isn't sufficient activity or there is no heartbeat from the microprocessor itself. This is very useful in situations when you have a battery backup and the glitches may happen. It helps you reset the system without having to turn it on and off, among many other things. So this does provide the reset to this microcontroller. Let's tap on that. And let's see what happens. Okay, it's high. Now look at that. It's pulsing it. Okay, so if it's pulsing it, it means that it's doing that because it's receiving nothing from the microprocessor. It basically waits for a certain amount of time. It doesn't get anything. It resets the microprocessor. So you can see that we're in this perpetual state. That's a bad sign. That means that the microcontroller has no activity at all and is not communicating to the management IC. But the management IC is definitely working because otherwise they wouldn't be doing this pulsing. So that's one thing. So yeah, I'm more and more convinced that we're going to have to try and replace the microprocessor and see if that makes any difference at all. And here we go. I went ahead and I replaced this. It's a little bit annoying to solder these because the pins are essentially under the package. And you have to be a bit patient, look at it from the angle, and make sure you're getting really every pin soldered and there are no shorts in between them. So I managed to do that. Here's the old part. So we're going to discard this one. I also removed the EEPROM, copied the content onto a computer, erased it using a UV eraser, reprogrammed it just to make sure that it is correct because the label had come off for some time. Other than that, it looks pretty good. Now, the other thing I tried was I looked at it briefly because not everything was connected, and there is indeed activity now on the processor. So that's very promising. I'm hoping that once we put everything together, we'll actually get it to power up. Well, some time has passed since the last segment recording of this video. If you recall, I did put a new CPU in there and I verified that there was some activity on the line, which was great. I formatted or I erased the EEPROM with the UV light, reprogrammed it back again, everything was looking good, and in fact the instrument was booting. But then when I completely put it back together, it wasn't working again. It would kind of boot up and then it would fade away. Then I figured out the reason was because one of the temperature measurement modules, this thing has 2 modules in it, had a problem, had a kind of a short on it. It wasn't really a short, but it was heating up one of the components and it wasn't being able to communicate with the main CPU. And that was really confusing. And the reason this didn't happen before was because the majority of the time I tested it without that module installed. So now we're missing one module, but I think I have a solution for that. So check it out. If I now turn it on, look at that. It does boot up perfectly fine. And then if you look carefully, as it tries to go through the self-test, it says failure 1. That's because I removed one of the modules. And it does tell us that it needs calibration. All of that is okay. If I press enter to continue, and then it sometimes throws an error, but I guess it was some memory corruption, but that seems to have been cleared. There you go. So it does boot, and we'll play with it in a second. But let me show you what the actual problem still remains. And here's our faulty module. So each of these modules has 2 4-wire measurement capabilities, which can read PRTs. These are resistive-based temperature sensors. This one doesn't communicate with the main CPU. It does get hot. Now, there is a working one in there. We could potentially compare it and figure out what's going on and potentially even repair it. But then I went around and looked around a little bit, and I found this one. Now, this module is compatible with the same system, but as you can see, this is thermocouple-based. So technically, I think the firmware is basically the same. If you install this, it'll detect that, and it will treat it like a PRT reader. If you install this one, it should be a thermocouple reader. So why don't we just put this inside, and if we do this, we'll get 2 channels for measuring PRTs and 2 channels for measuring thermocouples. It may even become a more useful module that way because it can measure several different kinds of detectors. So let's see what happens. All right, we have everything back together over here. I have now 2 channels of PRT and 2 channels of thermocouple, and I've connected 4 things to the instrument. Well, I have type K thermocouple here for channel 1, type K thermocouple for channel 2. I have a precision oil submerged 100 ohm resistor connected to channel 3 and an actual PRT PT100 type for channel 4. So for a PT100 type at exactly 100 ohms, you should have a reference of exactly 0 degrees Celsius. And since this is a precision resistor connected with 4-wire, we should be able to also see if it is actually measuring resistor correctly. Now, all of these temperature sensors should tell you roughly the same temperature. Now, some of them are sitting on the table, some of them are sitting over here, so they're not exactly actually the same temperature when we're talking about precisions at the level of this thing. So let's turn it on and see how it boots up. All right, let's give it a try. Turning this thing on. Let's see if it detects all of our channels correctly. So it should say that we have 2 different kinds of channels. And look at that, TC, TC, PRT, and PRT. So it does detect that. So the firmware is indeed common for all of this. Yeah, calibration expired. We know that. Let's see if it brings up all of our 4 measurements simultaneously. I've put it in all 4 menus. And here we go. Look at that. So we do have 2 thermocouples, and showing the specification of the first thermocouple, 22 and 21. And this is our PRT, 21.58. And this is our precision resistor. Look at that. It's almost 0 Celsius. So in fact, if you go through the menu and select the channels and turn all the other channels off, we should be able to see the exact reading of that channel with all of its information. And check it out, 99.9948 ohms. Not too bad. That's actually very close to where that resistor is supposed to be. So it is doing a pretty good precision resistance measurement. Now, because we're getting good data from all the channels, it is most likely working. And this is just a precursor for a video that I'm working on, which is going to be all about temperature metrology. So make sure you subscribe to the channel. You don't miss that. There's going to be a lot of really interesting things and some pretty rare items in that video that I'm going to show. But yeah, this looks like that it is indeed functional now, which is pretty good. Now let's go back to see if it makes all the measurements again. And it should look good. And here we go. So you can see it also stores a whole bunch of statistical data. I'm not sure if there's a way to change this so I can cycle between the channels. I couldn't figure it out. I have to look at the menu. It always shows up the channel that's active or the first channel. But it is able to make basically 4 measurements at the same time. As you can see, that mixed mode actually works on this. Pretty cool. And there you have it. I hope you enjoyed this quick repair, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out the temperature metrology video coming up hopefully soon. I'm working on several things at the same time, which I think you will find quite interesting. I'll see you next time.